Media bias may end up at the Supreme Court. Can we hope? Let's hope it happens while conservatives are in charge, because we got a problem. Horace Cooper is with the National Center for Public Policy Research and a Project 21 co-advisor. He's joining me now on the live line. Horace, welcome back to the show.
Hey, it's always a pleasure to come on your program.
Yeah, I love having you here because, dang it, I ask you a question and you go. So let's do the damn thing. All right? Media bias has gone nuts. The Project Veritas info I just played from Chuck is absolute, positive, unedited truth about the way that they take something, glom onto it because he said fear sells. And that's a problem, Horace.
So we're looking at unbelievable examples that our founders never, ever could have predicted. And that is that when they decided that it was useful to protect the media, or in the case of our founders, the press, from undue interference on the part of the government, they never imagined that we'd have a situation where the media, instead of accepting and playing its responsible role as a watchdog, has decided that it's one of the active participants for one side over the other. It's like you're sitting in a game watching, and suddenly you discover that one of the officials has removed his stripes and has placed a team jersey on and now grabs the ball and starts running as if he's going to score a touchdown. This is what we're seeing, and to make it practical, this is what we saw with the Hunter Biden laptop story. This is what we saw with the idea that there were Russian bounties being paid to kill American soldiers, and the media decided to pick one side over the other and to work with big tech to punish. This is the same thing that we're seeing with the Patrisse Cullors story, that one of the founders of BLM has been spending millions of dollars on acquiring high-end properties, and yet Facebook and big tech have decided that that's not an appropriate story. And if you ask reporters, they say that that's right because that risks somehow someone tracking her down and harming her. Notwithstanding all of the information that has been shared about people who are not in favor of the radical progressive ideas that she does. Yeah. All of this together gives us to a circumstance. Why would we continue to constitutionalize the ability, and by that I mean prevent or place limits on the ability of the American people to push back on a media that is, instead of acting as a watchdog, is just simply one of the many participants in the narrative that the progressives are pushing about how to change America.
It's all going to fall back to free speech, though, Horace. They can say whatever they want.
So here's the thing, and when our founders adopted the First Amendment, they never intended it to overwhelm the state laws dealing with libel and defamation. We had to wait until the 1960s under the Warren administration, under the Earl Warren Supreme Court, before we found out that the Constitution actually limits the ability of state governments to use their libel and defamation laws to hold media accountable. And that is the real question that Justice Thomas has asked in one of the dissents that he issued this year, in which he raises the question of the completely ahistorical role that the First Amendment had been playing in terms of protecting or preventing libel and defamation laws. That question is likely to come back before the Supreme Court, and that is the question, as I said, precisely because the media isn't playing its watchdog role. It is instead just one of the partisans in the fight over how to persuade America to adopt more progressive policies. If that's true, what's the good argument for continuing a process that says free speech means that you can say whatever you want? historically, that's not what free speech has been meant.
Yeah, or there wouldn't be condemnation of libel. That wouldn't exist if it were just a free-for-all.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So, but with the Sullivan decision, the Supreme Court decided during the Warren Court that the use of your media platform to say scurrilous things about an individual, if that individual was high profile, that individual was limited in their ability to respond unless they could prove that the media organ intended, acted with malice to harm you, rather than what had normally been the standard. If I say something about you that is untrue, you ask me to retract it. If I refuse, then you can sue me for damages.
You know, I'm looking for his name, and God help me, I can't find it. The kid that was approached by the Indian protester on the Capitol grounds in the Trump hat, allegedly. The way the media edited that to make him look like the bad guy, put his name out there, made him the enemy when he actually was the victim. And what ensued after that with the protests and the constant attacks that he was suffering, that is pretty much what I think. This is where my mind goes when we talk about this.
So Nick Sandmann is the case you're referring to.
Thank you.
And Nick Sandmann, as it happens, is not a prominent, high-profile figure in the public arena. So standard libel and defamation applied. And in that particular case, since there actually was evidence that he had not done the things, said the things, acted in a way that had been described, and all these media organs had been contacted and asked to issue corrections, which they refused, this is why it was possible to go forward with the litigation. If the standard that applied to Nick Sandmann applied to people who were prominent, high-profile, whether they're senators, whether they're governors, in many instances, they can just be actors or entertainers. If the Nick Sandmann standard applied, it would be the job of the media to get it right.
Imagine that. You know, what they're doing to a lot of legislators, from Rand Paul to Mitch McConnell and to others, and even Nancy Pelosi. I hate to give her any sympathy whatsoever, but the way they protest at their house, jump the fence, put body bags out, scream, yell, throw things at the houses, intimidate. They've done it to Tucker. They've done it to others. That's felonious activity that should not be tolerated. And just this morning, Horace, Maxine Waters telling Minnesota BLM protesters, I guess someone needs to buy their fourth house, to get more confrontational after the anti-police clashes erupted across the U.S. So she is out there calling for amping up the violence when Trump did nothing of the sort, and the court of public opinion wanted to take him out tar feather and dry him at the stake. So we've got her doing it.
This is clearly incitement to violence.
Right.
It would normally be protected if she went to the floor of the House of Representatives from penalty or sanction. However, that is not what she did. In fact, she wasn't even in her district. In some cases, courts have interpreted provocative statements made in your district would receive some additional protection. That's not this. This is pure and simple a person actively encouraging people to engage in mayhem, and yet we see no response on the part of local officials in Minnesota, and we're seeing Nancy Pelosi just quiet on the question. Here's the issue that I see, that the framers intended that there would be accountability for their members by the other House of Representatives, by the other members of the House of Representatives, and that's why Marjorie Taylor Greene, I guess, has issued released a bill that would require a vote on whether or not she, Miss Waters, ought to be sanctioned by the House, her fellow members, for her bad behavior.
Yeah, I agree, but how do we get it to the Supreme Court level where it stands a chance in hell? I know that Clarence Thomas would definitely look at this. We have a conservative majority, but are they so afraid of everybody showing up on their street? Because I know Maxine Waters doesn't want to give out her address so that the protest can be there. God forbid that. But how do we get the Supreme Court to take this seriously and do something?
Well, see, the Supreme Court can't act independently. Even I have some criticism with regard to the court's reticence to use its lawful power. It still can't just simply make up a case. It requires someone to prosecute her. It requires someone to bring forward a case, go to a trial court, have a trial over the matter, have a decision rendered, and then that get appealed to the Supreme Court. It's a lot of steps before that can happen, and the problem is that this is one of the reasons why Ms. Taylor's privileged motion is relevant here. It doesn't appear that anyone is prepared to hold a member accountable, notwithstanding you can go frame by frame with the last speech that President Trump gave as president and not find any of the items that would merit incitement for violence or any of the other elements that would be lead to a prosecution. In fact, as people have been going about their way during the advancing 100 days of the Biden administration, little attention is to how the cases for, quote, insurrection and rebellion, those charges have either not materialized or in the rare cases where those charges were filed, they have been dismissed in court. There is, I dare say, we will find out in a year that there will be not one case prosecuted successfully for insurrection or incitement for what ended up happening at the Capitol on the 6th of January.
Because that's not what happened. You know, it's just not what happened. The acts of a few.
That is not what happened. But what we did see with Maxine Waters are the actual elements of incitement. No prosecution, no threat of prosecution, no investigation takes place, and yet the mainstream media continues to claim that what happened on January 6th was an attack on democracy itself, notwithstanding multiple episodes of attacks on our Capitol over the last 40 years that no members of the mainstream media continue to discuss. And we just recently had an individual who happened to be black, so putting him in the wrong racial category, who attempted to use his vehicle to breach the Capitol. Mm-hmm. That is not referred to in any instance as an attack on democracy.
Yeah, because, it doesn't fit the narrative. All right, 30 seconds left. I don't know if we're going to be able to do anything about social media either, but they're far more damning than the media.
Well, one of the things that Clarence Thomas also has said is that we need to look carefully at what role social media plays in the modern American society. We've had a long line of case law over 200 years in which if you operate in the public square, you lose or forfeit the right to pick which particular customers you're going to use. That means that if you had a stagecoach, if you had a bridge, if you provided a water service with a dam, you couldn't pick those individuals that you were going to do business with and deny it to others. Similarly, social media may in fact meet all of those tests, and Clarence Thomas asks us to consider whether or not that's the standard that should apply, having nothing to do with Section 230.
Yeah, Candace Owens and others are just being blasted and harassed, and it's just crazy. Horace Cooper, National Center for Public Policy Research and Project 21 co-chair, he does it all. Where can they learn more about what you write, Horace?
Well, follow us on Twitter at Project 21 News, or you can go directly to our website, www.nationalcenter.org.
Horace Cooper. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Talk to you again. That's Horace Cooper.